When the App Store gets back with the success or failure message, we need to be ready and be able to react to that. And we do that by implementing the SK Transaction Observer Delegate protocol. We do that in the AppDelegate because that class is there all the time, and in case somebody made a purchase and then went offline and comes back online several years later, at least the App Store can still get back to us and complete the transaction. So we're not cheating the customer. There's a method that gets called by the App Store in response to the purchase, and it will react with a success or failure message. And we can implement different things, for example, unlock the full version if that was the case, or we can display an error message if we saw, hey, this didn't work so well. Let's see how that works in code. I'll head over into my AppDelegate header file, and after the add interface statement, I'm already conforming to the UI application delegate protocol. I'm also going to conform to the SK, actually, before I do that even, let's import StoreKit, of course. Very important. Otherwise, AppDelegate isn't going to know that the SK Payment Transaction Observer protocol even exists. So there we go. Now it knows. That's all we really need to do in the header file. Let's head over to the implementation file. And the best place to add that observer is, of course, in application did finish launching with options. That's all we need to do. Now the App Store can get back, and whenever it comes back with a message, we can react to it. Now we see this little warning sign here. That means we haven't implemented the method that can react. Let's do that next. Perhaps at the bottom here, we collapse some of that code. And there's really only one method that we're interested in, and that's this one here, payment queue updated transactions. Again, we're being passed the actual payment queue that initiated this, and we're going to get an array of transactions here, which we can loop through. Conceivably, the user could have bought 3 products, so therefore this would get called 3 times, and the array would have 3 transactions perhaps in it. Well, it would get called once, but with 3 transactions. Let's loop through it. It's an array of SK payment transactions, and in it we can ask, what's the transaction state? Since we have several options here, we're going to loop through that with a switch statement. Transaction state. And lucky for us, this is an enumeration, so there's 4 of them that we may possibly be interested in, and they all start with SK payment transaction state failed, purchased, purchasing, and restored. So let's think positive here and say we've just purchased something. Next we can ask, are we currently purchasing? Then we can ask for, have these transactions been restored, and react to that accordingly. And last but not least, worst case scenario, payment transaction state failed. This is a bit of a daunting piece of code, and again, I invite you to copy and paste from that little snippet in that article I've mentioned a few times. Right now, we're really only interested in the first case here, the purchase went well. So let's see what we need to do here. We need to unlock the full version, otherwise the user's going to get grumpy. We don't want that. We also need to let the App Store know that we want to finish the transaction. And this takes this transaction out of that array and finishes it for good, so it doesn't get constantly called again and again. This is a common mistake, that if you forget to put that in, your transaction was already successful, but the next time the app is launched, the transaction is trying to be put through again, and that's because it was never finished. So finishing, very important. And Apple also recommend that you save the receipt that you get from this transaction, so that on consequent restores you can compare it with receipts that you may have already stored somewhere in iCloud or something. To make our lives easier, let's write some methods for that here. I'll say unlock full version. I'll also say save receipts. And perhaps restore transaction. Now I can call these things here. Unlock the full version, so we've just written that method. Save the receipt, we've also just implemented. And finish the transaction, I didn't write a method for that because it's fairly simple to do. It's something we call on the escape payment queue, finish transaction, current transaction. There. Unlocking the full version, I say we're just going to save a boolean in our user defaults. There are several ways to do that, much more secure methods to do that, but for this example we're just going to save yes to user defaults. And perhaps we're just going to call it full version. There. Which means that when the app starts, we can check and see if this key is yes or no, full version, and therefore update our UI. While we're at it, and before we forget, let's do that. Head over to our view controller implementation file, and in our view.did_load method, if that key exists, we'll update our label. And if that's not the case, well, one's capital, one's lowercase, so we can immediately tell what's happened here. Remember our storyboard here on the iPhone? It says update me. So if we were to run this app now, it should at least come up with the free version. Let's see, shall we? Simulator should be able to do that. We're going to test this with real devices later. Just wanted to see if things actually work here. Free version, perfect. Pressing any of these buttons is not going to do anything because we haven't implemented that yet. So let's work on that next.